Welcome to today's live training. Today we are talking about busy women and that pesky boom bust cycle. I'm Dr. Anna Redmond. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm a chronic pain strategist. I'm board certified in biofeedback and I've worked all over the system. And now I'm coming to you in a virtual setting because I want to try to get this education out to as many women as possible. So if you know someone else who can benefit from these live trainings, please invite them to the group. I'd love to have more women joining us. But let's kind of get started. So if you see me looking to the side, I'm usually tracking with my notes. I try to provide as much value as possible. For those of you that are new, let's just talk about what's on the menu for today's live stream. I promise it's going to be a treat. And it's not just because we'll be diving into some seriously life-changing information, but we're going to unravel the mystery of the boom bust cycle. You know that frustrating roller coaster where one day you're totally crushing it and then the next day you're totally wiped out. Yes, that's what we're going to break down today. And then we'll take a little detour into science land, but don't worry, I'm not going to turn into a mad scientist. We're just going to cover some basics about why this cycle happens in the first place. And the spoiler here is that it's not just in your head. And after that, we're going to kind of get real about how this cycle sneaks into your daily life. It messes with your work, your family time, and even your me time. And so, trust me, as you listen in, you'll be nodding along as I describe these struggles. But don't get upset, don't worry, don't fret. We're not just here to commiserate on this. I'm going to share some golden nuggets of wisdom on how to navigate and manage this cycle like the boss that you are. And these tips are going to be your new best friends. And finally, we'll talk about kind of maintaining long-term productivity and that joy and vitality that you're desperately seeking. It is possible. I'll share some secrets on how to keep your energy levels stable and your life balanced so that you can say goodbye to those pesky flare-ups that keep disrupting everything. So stick around to the end because I have an exciting opportunity for you to dive even deeper into breaking this cycle once and for all. And that will involve working with me. So get comfy, grab a cup of your favorite beverage. I unfortunately just have water. It's all I had time for before we started. And don't forget, I want to hear from you throughout this live training. Drop your comments, questions as we go along, okay? Let's go. And before we get started, whoever's attending live or even the replay, introduce yourself in the comments. So tell us where you're coming from, what you're hoping to learn in this group, okay? I'd love to hear from you. Okay, so let's talk about that boom bust cycle. We're just going to sort of define it to start things off. So what is it? Why is it so common? So I think here's the picture, right? So one day you're on top of the world, you wake up and you've won what I like to call the pain lottery, the chronic pain lottery, where pain isn't so bad that day, you're moving great, you feel rested, and all of a sudden that to-do list pops into your head and you decide to just seize the good pain day. You're a superwoman, you're tackling your to-do list, you're doing it like a pro, you're juggling work, family, maybe you're squeezing in a bit of me time as well, and you're just pushing through, you're getting things done, you feel just unstoppable. That's the boom of the boom bust cycle. But then out of nowhere comes the bust, or maybe it's delayed for you, right? Maybe it's later that evening, or you wake up the next day and you just feel like you've hit a brick wall. Your energy is completely drained, that pain is totally unbearable, and just getting out of bed feels like an Olympic event. Does this sound familiar? That's the bust part of the cycle. And this cycle of pushing hard when you feel good, the boom, and then crashing when your body can't keep up anymore, the bust, is something that many of us, especially those of us who would identify as perfectionists or overachievers or just plain busy, that's something that many of us experience. But why is it so common? One reason is that we live in a world that praises busyness and productivity. We have high expectations for ourselves. We want to be the best at work, the best mom, the best partner, and somehow still have time to take care of ourselves. And so we push through the pain, we push through the fatigue, we ignore the signals our bodies are sending us to slow down. We slow down for a period of time, we start to feel better, and then we do it all over again. And here's the kicker. This push crash pattern not only drains our energy, but it also makes your pain cycle worse. The more we push, the harder we crash. And it's a vicious loop that can just keep us feeling stuck, frustrated, and our body's super sensitive. So if this sounds like you, drop a yes in the comments, whether you're watching the replay or attending live, and let's just kind of see how many of us are here hoping to break free from that cycle once and for all. But here's the problem of this push crash cycle when you have chronic pain. You not only flare up physically and emotionally in a general way and keep your stress hormones active without a break, but you also flare up your pain. Without the proper education, pain flare ups can be kind of scary. Maybe they're worrisome, and for many, they might even be an indication that something is really wrong this time. And this is a vicious cycle, as you know, because flare ups continue. They start to happen more frequently, more intensely. Maybe they're more unpredictable, or you just feel like you're constantly in one. And the worse you feel, the less you do, the more grief you experience, the more you withdraw. And this can lead ultimately to more distress and more pain. And when flare ups occur sort of in this traditional Western medical environment, we go back to the doctor in search of a new diagnosis or new medical treatments. We might seek these things despite already having discovered and tried them before with poor results. But it's just this vicious cycle that can keep you kind of stuck in your pain, stuck seeking treatment, stuck trying to figure out what's wrong. Now, you have to believe me when I tell you this cycle is so common. It shows up all the time among women I speak with, and I 100% dealt with this myself. In my early years, or, really, who am I kidding? Like most of my adult years, I pushed too hard. I pushed through physical symptoms, signs from my body of all kinds, difficulty breathing, joint pain, muscle pain, fatigue, headaches. I also pushed through emotional symptoms. And for me, I can feel the emotional buildup and overwhelm in a really physical way, literally starting at my feet and building up my body. And when those symptoms feel like they have moved all the way up my body, there's usually some sort of emotional release in the form of sadness, anger, frustration, or exasperation. I learned this about myself. And I had a habit of pushing too hard for too long. I often ignored my stress levels. My body's stress response never got the chance to turn off. My body's stress response never got the message, I am safe now, so that it could turn off and complete its cycle. And why did I push through? I don't know. Why do any of us push through? Why was pacing and managing my energy so hard for me, even with the negative consequences staring at me in the face? My personality and some traits that were rather unhelpful at times, like people pleasing, perfectionism, wanting to keep up, seeking a sense of accomplishment, determination to complete a task no matter what that meant. All of these things would add a nice thick layer of life stress on top of pain. And I had myself a nasty little problem there. And as they say, what goes up must come down. So I would push and push and push and push. And then when I couldn't, I would push some more. And then when I crashed, I would avoid, I would rest, I would retreat inside myself. I'd come out somewhat more refreshed, and then I'd push all over again. And now the pull to do this is so strong. And I know that you feel it too, both from external factors and my own personality. Um, I can say that this was my experience, that this pull to continue in this way was so strong. It was hard to get out of that cycle. It's almost a bit addicting sometimes. But let's kind of talk that through. External factors play a significant role in pushing women into that boom bust cycle. Societal expectations and cultural norms often pressure women to excel in multiple roles simultaneously. So, whether that's their careers, as caregivers, personal pursuits, there's this relentless demand for perfection and productivity, which can lead to overexertion during periods of high energy, followed by inevitable crashes when the body's limits are exceeded. And we can also add to the list here workplace environments that lack flexibility or support for managing chronic conditions, or even just managing life, having children, can exacerbate the cycle, and it can leave women to feel like they have no choice but to push through pain and fatigue. Moreover, the lack of adequate support systems, insufficient childcare, limited access to healthcare, the absence of understanding from employers, family members, all of these things can intensify the stress and physical strain. Financial pressures, the need to meet economic responsibilities can also force women to overextend themselves. It can cause them to ignore their body's signals to rest and recover. And these external pressures really do create a perfect storm that can trap us into this boom bust cycle, make it really challenging to achieve sustainable balance between activity and rest. The boom bust cycle is also deeply rooted in physiological and psychological mechanisms. Physiologically, our bodies have a limited amount of energy reserves, and when we push ourselves too hard, we deplete those reserves faster than our bodies can replenish them. This is particularly true for those of us dealing with chronic pain and fatigue. The initial boom phase feels productive, maybe even exhilarating, because our bodies are running on adrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormones that provide a temporary boost in energy. However, this unsustainable high leads to a significant crash once the adrenaline wears off, and it leaves us in that bust phase, characterized by exhaustion, increased pain, and decreased functionality. The cycle repeats as we struggle to regain our energy and productivity, often leading to further depletion and prolonged recovery times. Psychologically, the boom bust cycle is driven by our mindset and our coping strategies. Many women feel immense pressure to meet high expectations in their personal and professional lives, leading to that push through mentality. And this mindset is often reinforced by those social norms that I talked about, the norms that glorify busyness and productivity. On top of that, the guilt, the frustration of not being able to keep up can cause stress and anxiety, and this further exacerbates the cycle. And the anticipation of the next crash, though, can also create sort of this looming sense of dread. It can lead to overcompensation during the boom phase as we try to get ahead of that inevitable downturn. So the psychological pattern not only perpetuates the cycle, but makes it increasingly difficult to break free from it without conscious intervention, the right kind of education, and a shift in mindset. And, I feel like I've done a lot of work on this, but sometimes even I feel the tendency to go back to it. There are so many factors it feels like are working against me with this sometimes, but I've learned skills to keep that cycle from rearing its ugly head again. So, comment in the chat if you've experienced similar patterns. Share your patterns in the comments. You're probably not alone. I think it helps people not feel so alone when they can see that others have similar experiences. So, now I'd like to talk about how the boom bust cycle impacts our daily lives, especially for busy women, perfectionists, overachievers, people pleasers, anyone who falls into that one of those categories. And so here's an example. You're at work, you've had a fantastic start to your week, you're hitting all your targets, you're going to all the meetings, you're feeling super productive, and then midweek you hit a wall. Suddenly your energy is drained, everything seems to hurt, your productivity nosedives, deadlines start slipping, and you might even need to take an unexpected sick day, which only adds to your stress and guilt. At home, it's just as challenging, right? You're trying to be the perfect mom, partner, friend, managing household chores, helping with homework, planning family activities. On your boom days, you're superwoman. You're getting everything done with energy to spare, but then the bus days arrive and you can barely make it to dinner without being laid up on the couch with a flare up, a sensitive body, everything hurts, and you're worried something might be wrong because it hurts so bad. This can lead to a lot of frustration and guilt because you want to give your best to your family and friends, but your body simply won't cooperate. When it comes to personal goals, that boom bust cycle can be so disheartening. Whether you're trying to maintain a fitness routine, pursue a hobby, dedicate time for self care, consistency feels impossible. And one week you might be making amazing progress, and the next week you're too fatigued to even think about your goals. And it hurts to move, so you have to withdraw. And again, this leads to more failure and disappointment. You aren't having good experiences with movement in this situation. And with movement being the number one safety generator for pain and your bust phase desire to avoid it, you might find your body becoming more sensitive. Everything is flared up. So, common symptoms of the cycle include fluctuating energy levels, chronic pain flare ups, obviously, pain that becomes more widespread, more sensitive, more unpredictable, even maybe emotional swings. You might notice days where you feel totally unstoppable, but that often these are followed by days where every task feels like this monumental effort. This roller coaster impacts your physical well being, but also takes a toll on your mental health. Maybe you might notice signs of anxiety, stress, worrying about when the next crash will occur. You can't be consistent with anything that's important to you with this cycle, and you certainly can't sustain routines or productivity. And I think a lot of women I speak with, they almost get to a place where this becomes part of their identity. Yeah, I have chronic pain, but I just kind of push through it anyway. I keep doing the things I have to do because what else am I going to do? So I just push through. I push through, and then I have a crash, and then I just do it again. And that's just what my life is with chronic pain. I'd love to hear from you. How has the boom bust cycle affected productivity for you? Share your experiences in the comments. Let's support each other and see how many of us are dealing with these same struggles. Your story might be the one that someone else needs to hear today. And when you reach your physical limit, your emotional limit, and the limit of the treatment options available to you, at some point, I think many women realize that most of what moves you in a direction away from pain has everything to do with you. And I'm not saying this to put all of the onus, the guilt, or any failure onto you. It's I'm trying to bring this to light that you actually have so much more control over this process than you think you do. A lot of it can come down to you. The messages you communicate to your brain, the opportunities you give your body, the interventions for safety that you provide for your nervous system, the education that you seek, because that education might not automatically be provided to you. How many cycles of this have you experienced of pushing through without a break, exhausting yourself, burning yourself out to the max before you came to terms with the fact that something had to change? Have you come to those terms yet? And this leads me to pacing. So we're going to sort of talk about strategies here. It's easy to think we know how to pace. Just have a smaller to-do list, right? Be okay with less, take breaks. It's not that hard, right? Because we still have to get things done and stay as active as possible while managing our pain. This is what we think. You want to truly live your life. I did too. I had to learn that this was not just about physical therapy, medications, and self care. We have to reformulate how we are thinking about our days, our weeks, our months, and managing our body's energy. In my clinical experience, learning how to properly pace is a game changer, 100% game changer. I am convinced that if everyone with chronic pain or any chronic condition learned how to properly pace, we would see much less pain in the world. And maybe we would even see a change in this culture of running a race we didn't really sign up for. But let's break down the strategy a little bit. With the idea of pacing has to first come an acceptance of your baseline. What is your starting point right now? And here's what I mean. How much activity can you do, or of a certain activity, and for how long can you do it before you flare up your pain? A 10-minute walk, 5 minutes of dishes, 1 minute of laundry? I think this probably takes a little bit of experimenting, but I think we often know what the answer is, and sometimes we just don't like it. We aren't used to having to break our behavior and activity down into small, sometimes tiny, manageable parts. Why do we need to pace? Well, we need to pace because we can't build from a flare up. That's obvious. We can't keep pushing. We can't keep having high levels of pain and expect to be and stay productive without the disappointment and depression that comes with being in a chronic state of flare ups. We need to pace because we need to recalibrate our nervous system. It becomes hypersensitive, especially when we're in a constant flare up. We need to pace to retrain our brain. Let's have some experiences with movement that don't result in a flare up, that communicate to our brain that this movement is safe. Anytime you have a positive experience with movement, your brain will remember that. Our brain loves repetition. If we repeat that safe experience with movement over and over, our brain will start to realize that this particular movement or movement in general is not unsafe. When you do that repeatedly and your brain learns that movement is safe, that hurt doesn't necessarily mean harm, and that is something that you can build from. And we need to pace so we can slowly, intentionally, and without flare-ups recondition our bodies to be more used to activity again. Now, when I work with women who have pain, the acceptance that was needed to start pacing is always the hardest part. Old tapes would play over and over in their heads, reminding them of the good old days before pacing was ever a thought or ever even needed. And once people accept their baseline or their new starting point, pacing was the number one intervention that helped them reduce flare ups. And once they were kind to themselves, once they dropped the expectations of others down a notch and focused on what their brain and body needed to be safe, they could start making progress. And if you're trying to pace and become angry or frustrated, this could mean that you haven't yet found acceptance for your baseline, or maybe you haven't found the right baseline. You may have to dig a little bit deeper. For example, I find that I found that I would get angry at my pain and the need to pace when I've overcommitted, when I've taken on too much and putting people pleasing or pleasing others ahead of what my own values were, which my values are time, movement, health, and family. When I'm making a to-do list, pleasing others and thriving, off the business, it keeps me from over succumbing to fatigue or maybe focusing on the more important things that I'm avoiding. But I find that if I can accept my baseline for that season of life, because sometimes our baseline changes, I can make decisions that stem from my values, from what's important for me, and use pacing to design a day with better balance and regular breaks. And then I can see my physical and my mental health soar. And that is when I am my most productive, believe it or not, my most outgoing, my most authentic, most efficient self, taking the most steps toward the things that are meaningful for me is when I'm pacing. And so sometimes we need to look at why we push ourselves past our limits and compare that version of us with the version of us that we'd like to see, a version of us with better balance. And honestly, before I even had pain, I could see the benefit. I can see in hindsight, obviously, the benefit that pacing would have had for me, even as a person without pain. Now, what pacing looks like is different for everyone. It isn't just accepting a baseline and taking breaks throughout the day. If it were that simple, you'd all be doing this successfully already, I'm sure. I believe you probably have already found the education you need. Plus, I know you're ambitious and motivated and you work hard to feel better. But it isn't as simple as buying an app or reading a book or attending a webinar. It isn't as simple as just getting education. And I certainly can't teach every single person in the general public in the most effective way one way of pacing. And I'm willing to bet that no one has told you exactly how to pace for you and your pain and your situation. Beyond that, I'm willing to bet that no one has ever taken a helicopter view of your day with you to tell you exactly how to apply science backed strategies to each hour of your day to dial down the overprotectiveness of your brain and your nervous system every day. When we apply science backed skills and we do it strategically in a way that acknowledges our unique days, the things we have to do, the things we want to do, the context of our life, that is when we see progress happen. And I know you don't need more education. Most women I talk to just need a strategy. So, as we wrap up today's session, let's talk about what happens next. As a chronic pain strategist, I'm here to be your detective, to dive deep into your boom bust cycle with you, get into the nitty gritty of your daily routine, and together we'll apply pacing strategies that help retrain your brain to be less protective, allowing you to find more stable levels of feeling good. And this will enable you to be more productive and do the things you truly want to do. You are unique. You are multidimensional, and pacing, along with acceptance, looks different for everyone. So, wouldn't it be helpful to get a helicopter view of your day to see whether you're taking steps toward your values or sacrificing what you need just to get things done? And wouldn't it be great to get a visual of the balance in your life and then have someone dive into that with you, guiding you step by step, working through the barriers, identifying the things that you can't see yourself, and cheering you on each step of the way? This is exactly what I provide in my Breaking Through Pain program. I give you the step by step strategy to approach your days in a different way, one that helps you find consistency, joy, vitality, freedom, and sustained productivity. Women in my program tell me they wish they had found me sooner, that they're reconnecting with the person that they were before their pain, that they make decisions based on what is important to them, and that they're doing this with a feeling of confidence and freedom instead of blind pushing through and flare ups. And a lot of that is because of the work that they did to prepare for pacing and then the pacing strategy that we put together. And if that sounds good for you and you're ready to break out of these cycles and find a sustainable way to live your best life, I invite you to book a call with me. We can work together. We can create a personalized strategy that fits your unique situation. So drop the comment call in the comments. Just type call in the comments and I'll reach out to you directly to schedule a time. We can take this journey together, personalized guidance step by step, every step of the way, an A to Z guide, and transform your day to day life into something that brings you joy, vitality, and sustained productivity. That is what a chronic pain strategist will do with you. Thank you so much for joining today's session. I can't wait to connect with you all personally. I'm looking at the comments here. There's some comments that I can relate to the external pressure of being busy, how it's often rewarded, and then the guilt comes in. Um, Oh, and someone else who is actively and successfully pacing. They've been doing a lot of gardening, but proud that they stopped before it was all finished. So this is wonderful. Please continue to share your comments, your experiences, what gets in the way of successful pacing for you. What personality features do you think hinder this process for you? What keeps you stuck in that boom bust cycle? I want to hear all about it. So whether you're watching the replay or attending live, leave some comments for me. I'll respond to them. And if you want to connect with me personally, just type call in the comments and I will reach out and we'll just talk personally on a call. It'll be super fun. Okay, thank you for attending, everyone, and I will talk to you all soon.